And I think what we're seeing with electoral areas A and E and the financial situation they're both in, we need to be able to move the money in both directions. Excuse me. So could we do that under the new policy, allocate from the pooled fund to electoral areas? And if not, what would it take to make that so?
So I'll pass that to Ms. Greenan, but my understanding is that's exactly what the policy does. The new policy keeps the funding in a single pool, and Ms. Greenan will correct me if I'm wrong, but it would keep the funding in a single pool with these targets, and the funding is the prioritization of projects would use those targets to help guide decisions, but it would not prevent funding to an area beyond its targets. So funding could go to an area for important projects beyond its targets, but it would kind of put some pressure on the trying to allocate as much funding towards the areas that haven't received funding in prior projects. Ms. Greenan, maybe you could clarify that. And I see the corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. No, I don't have any corrections, anything to change. Just wanted to reiterate what Director Fall said, and that there isn't a pool for regional funds. It's just a single funding pool. And as Chair Fall said, we want the aspirational targets will serve as a guide to how the board might want to prioritize its spending.
I saw the corporate officer with their hand, and then I'll recognize Director Brander. Corporate officer.
I just wanted to say first that I did email the policy to everyone just for convenience. And then additionally, the policy does address remaining unallocated funds and how they will be dealt with at the end. When what it says is at the start of a new funding agreement, any remaining unallocated funds from the prior funding agreement will be added to the target allocations of electoral areas, proportional to the difference between target and actual allocations over the time frame of the prior funding agreement. So the policy does provide direction. The confusion was that this item was postponed before adoption of the new policy. So
Thank you. Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. Seeing as this recommendation was made prior to the policy being developed, I think it makes sense to have it sent back to staff and revise, looking at it through a new lens, because I think at the very least the numbers will change, but at least we'll have a new set of recommendations that are based on the policy that we adopted recently.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Oh, okay. So that'd be a motion. So, was that a motion, Director Brander?
Sure.
Or I mean, or we keep going around. We can hold off on the motion till everyone who hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, I'll hold off on it then.
Okay, so I'll add myself. I see Director McCormick for a second round, but anyone else who hasn't spoken, and Director Lennox, and I'll add myself.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I just add my voice to applying. We spent a lot of effort and a lot of, I think, constructive discussion around the new policy, and I think the pointing out 3F there, it does speak to unallocated funds. So I think that's probably appropriate for our staff to really understand what the remaining funds, what that does mean to, because my first blush means area gets nothing anyways out of that because of the target allocation. So again, it does really, the ramifications of our new policy. I think that's where we all wanted to start anyways, was whatever's remaining, let's figure out what we're doing with it. And by not making a decision to be too definitive now, like that's a good first effort by the EA directors to get together and make our first decision around how to allocate those funds as per the policy and as per the directors. That was our discussion on that. So yeah, that's those are my thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you.
The motion.
Thanks. Great, thank you. So I'll add my thoughts, and then recognize Director McCormick and then Director Gisborne. So I think there's two kind of subtexts here. One is whether we should send it, whether we agree with the policy, in which case I think we should use the new policy for this, and I think we should to achieve that we should send it to staff to bring forward numbers. And I have a question for our staff I'll get to in a moment. But really, if we did that, we would have the numbers, because the numbers in the October report do not match at all how the new policy is in terms of the funding formula, the difference between targets and actual spending and all that. We don't have the numbers in there. And so I have the numbers. I could calculate it, but I don't think that's appropriate because that's, not in our agenda. So I would prefer that this would go back to staff. Staff could bring forward, and the question will be in a moment about, timing, whether that would be okay for timing. And the second question is whether we bring it back here or go to the new committee that follows from the new policy. And now I have a bit two thoughts on that. I'm not against that. I don't think it's necessary in the sense that the idea of that committee is mostly about new projects and about deciding on actual spending on actual projects, whereas this is about how to reset the stage at the beginning of a new funding agreement from the CWF, and that's built into the policy. There isn't really, it's meant to be done objectively. There isn't really a core decision there. That said, I'm not against it going to that committee. If the majority would prefer that would start the committee up. We'd talk about it. I don't. The policy is pretty clear on what the numbers would be. It's a calculation. So I'll bring this to my two questions for Ms. Green. And one is the timing okay in terms of bringing numbers back for February? Does that work for the workload and in terms of making a decision on this? And the second is related to that, is the timing of when, maybe this is more for the corporate officer, the second one, the timing of when such a committee might be created. Because my only concern about that is, do we have time to create the committee and meet and have this on an agenda and then get back through the process in time to adopt our budget? So maybe Ms. Greenan first on, is this time sensitive, or is it just has to be done before our budget's adopted?
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. This wouldn't have to be done before the budget's adopted, because we, in the policy, we're not going to actually allocate funds to each area per se. We're just, you just want to know what the numbers are so that the board knows what the aspirational targets are, with these funds incorporated.
Okay, that's great. That helps a lot, because maybe if we want to do this in a way, and I'll send it to the corporate officer in a second, but then if we can concur that the decision is to follow the policy, if we agree on that, then perhaps our financial staff, we could send that to the committee. The numbers would come through the process. So really, I'll maybe ask our corporate officer on the timing of that committee and whether that would come in the next few months. Doesn't sound like there's an urgency on this deciding here, but having a clear process. So corporate officer, on with this committee, what's the status of creating this committee?
Thank you so much, Chair, through the chair. Staff is currently working on preparing terms of reference for either this committee or the board to consider. If the committee considers it, then the timing would be for establishing it at the end of February, but I think we might be able to aim for either the end of January or the beginning of February for board to establish it, depending on if the board is okay with us bringing it directly to the board, then that would make it faster.
Okay, thank you. And just so before I hand it over to the next director, is that the policy that we have in place, 3F, says, and I'll go through it a little bit in detail so we can be clear. At the start of a new funding agreement, so that's really what we're talking about, trying to clear the stage at the start of the 2024 to 2034 agreement. Any remaining unallocated funds, that's what we're talking about, from the prior funding agreement will be added to the target allocations of the EAs proportional to the difference between target and actual allocation. So that proportional to the target is to try to rebalance the targets as fairly as possible and get everything as close as possible to 100% of the target, which isn't going to be possible in all cases, and in particular in this case, but getting as close as possible. That calculation is a little bit nuanced, so it's not something we can just pop out of the air right here. Be better to have that clarified by staff. But that's really what we're talking about. So I'll hand it over to Director McCormick and then Director Gisborne. And then when we're done the round of questions, I'll pass back to Director Brander, who had a motion. Director McCormick?
Thank you, Chair. I do have another question, and that is, if our existing policy, current, that we've just approved, puts all the money in a single pool. Would an electoral area committee, should that be formed, and by the way, I support doing that, have the authority to then designate percentages of that pool to various areas?
Well, I'll address it and then I'll hand it to Ms. Greenan. According to the policy, no. According to the policy, it be so the committee, as described in the policy that we adopted, creates that committee to decide on allocation of new projects according to the prioritization guidelines. So there's guidelines set out when a project comes forward, that committee would decide whether or not to spend money and how much on a new fire truck for wherever, or whatever it would be. The policy we didn't really talk about whether the committee would discuss the how to deal with unallocated funds at the end of a agreement period, which is what we're talking about here. Now, that doesn't mean the committee couldn't do something different from the policy, but if the committee followed the policy, it would be allocating it according to a calculation that our financial staff would apply. Ms. Greenan, do you have anything you might add to clarify that?
Thank you, Chair. No, I don't really have anything to clarify it. Just as you pointed out, the policy does say that the funds will be managed as a single funding pool, and the target allocations are aspirational, not strict goals. So based on the policy, we wouldn't be specifically allocating funds to each electoral area, but as the chair said, the committee would make recommendations on how the funding would be spent, in various electoral areas, and that would and the goal would be to get the spending closer to the target allocations for each area.
Thank you. And just to clarify, before I see you add something further, Director McCormick, item 8 in the new policy says proposals to use CWF funds shall be considered by a committee of the QRD electoral area directors prior to being forwarded to a committee comprising of all QRD board members to make recommendations to the board. So that would be finance committee right now. So that's really the operative words is proposals to use funds. So it's not talking about allocation at the end of the period. That doesn't mean it can't be, and I don't think I'm not averse to that as long as it doesn't harm our timing. I think, but it doesn't actually. I think that's more a deliberation process and deciding whether the policy is followed or not. The policy is clear on what that is, unlike a new proposal, which is subjective and deliberative. But you can carry on if you have further.
No, I've asked my questions. I have some comments, but I'll save those for later. Thank you.
Okay. I see Director Elliott, and then I'll go to Director Gisborne, but she hasn't spoken yet. Director Elliott.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify some of the language we're using when we're talking. We talked about what a committee is going to decide. So committee decides on recommendations, not on the actual decisions. And so we keep talking about the committee as deciding these things when actually they're deciding their recommendations for these things. And so I just wanted to clear that up language-wise. It seems to, even for the public, create an expectation that isn't really what we're doing.
Correct. So just to get the operative words from the section I just read, proposals shall be considered by a committee of EA directors. That's the new committee. So considered. So they'll make a recommendation prior to being forwarded to, let's say, finance committee. It's more or less the words, to make a recommendation. So the committees one committee makes a recommendation to finance committee makes a recommendation to the board makes final decision. So it's that two-step process is what we established. Thank you. Director Gisborne, and then we'll see if there's any other questions. And
thank you, Chair. I got one question that just popped in my mind. The funding agreement timeline, I think I recall from the report, the current funding agreement is 2024 to 2034. Is that correct? I'm seeing some nods.
Yeah.
Ms. Greenan, I think so, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct.
And what was the time frame for the previous funding agreement? Was that 2014 to 2024? Okay.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Very good information. One of the things that makes me kind of think a bit of time sensitivity on this item is, as we all recall from, I believe, November, there's an issue with the Myrtle Pond water system. There is going to need a new well. I really hope we can get that new committee established because I would love to allocate some community works funds towards the replacement of that new well out in Area B. I think it's something that might be eligible, and I would love to make that motion, but in accordance with our policy, it's not appropriate for me to make such a motion at this committee or at the board. So when we can get that new committee established, that's going to be essentially the first motion I'm going to put forward to use some of those community works funds for the Myrtle Pond water system. And that's why I think there's a bit of a time sensitivity with it, because if we decide to fund the capital project with, say, a portion of community works funds, that might affect the budget when we go into our financial plan deliberations. And I don't like making big changes in March. And so hopefully we can get that committee established relatively soon and we can get some projects put before it. That's kind of my thoughts at the moment. And I'm okay with the motion. I'm not a huge fan of more paperwork, but if we can get this committee established and we can start actually allocating some of these community works funds, that'll make me very happy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. And thanks for asking about the timeline, because of course we're 2026. We've been receiving funds under the new agreement. Those are building up and now they're going to be applied under the new policy. This is about tidying up the 2014 to 2024 agreement. And I guess to pursuant to what you just said there, to clarify what you said about the motion, I think if we want to follow the new policy, I think the corporate officer might help us with what exactly is the procedure if we want to make clear direction that that's what we want to do, and clear direction of how, whether we want to go to this new committee. Seeing no other hands, I'll then hand it to Director Brander, Director McCormick, you wanted yet another question?
Yeah. Why would the Electoral Area Services Committee report back to Finance rather than being a standing committee on its own?
Well, I'll hand that to the corporate officer. The short answer is because that's what we put in the policy. So the policy says that it's not a rural services committee. It's a committee work. I don't know what the name will be, but it's a committee of EA directors. So it's basically a CWF committee that would forward recommendations to the finance committee. And the reason that's the process is because that's the process the board agreed to. Corporate officer, maybe you could add to that.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, through the chair. It is because the policy states that, and also we need to officially establish the committee. So it might not be it likely would not be a standing committee. It would likely be an advisory or a select committee that will report through the way the policy will run.
And if I could add a bit more clarity for you, Director McCormick, also the rationale is that new committee is only for EA directors. So by forwarding to finance, that allows all directors on the board to have a discussion with the benefit of the recommendation from this new committee with all the directors before sending a recommendation to the board. And that I think is the essence of what we're talking about, because at the board, all directors will vote on it. So it's a fairness thing of allowing the city directors to have an opportunity to discuss it at committee. You had your hand up, and then I see Director Lennox. Director McCormick?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
You're done. Okay, Director Lennox?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and maybe for Ms. Green. And I just want to go back one question before that again, because maybe I just want to get it clear for mostly myself and people watching. So we're talking about two things, the policy and how it applies to new funds in a new period, but also the old period that just ended, I believe you said 2024. So I just want to be 100% clear, the $735,000 that is remaining unallocated, that's for that period. So you kind of nodding, I'll let you explain. How long do we, once it's allocated to those other areas, that's what'll happen. How long do they have to spend it is my question.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, thank you, Chair. Through the chair. There is a rolling 5-year timeline to spend the funds. So yeah, so it keeps rolling, and that will be part of the reporting process. I'll report how much is left, that has to be spent in each period.
Each incremental 5-year.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, which complicates matters. Thanks.
Yeah, and by keeping it in a pooled fund, that actually, as long as we're spending money on an ongoing basis from community works, that will roll over, which is easier to do than if it's divided up into pots where that 5-year period might hit. Okay, so seeing no other hands up, I don't think. So Director Brander, did you want to still make a motion?
Sure, yeah, I'd like to refer it back to staff, just so that any updates can be made to the report that will take our new policy into consideration. And then have recommendations based on that.
Okay, thanks. And corporate officer, maybe is there any wording that would help with that? And I guess so. Just to task before we get a seconder, Director Brander, would that include bringing information back here as well as timing for committee? That's kind of yeah.
So,
Okay.
I would say that the item be referred to staff to provide updated numbers as per the policy.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I don't know if just corporate officer, do we need to provide any direction of how that proceeds, or is it just if we do this, the policy will unfold and the committee will be created and all these other things that are discussed will just happen?
Thank you. Through the chair, the goal is to have that to you guys as soon as possible. So
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you for that. So is there, before we get into discussion, is there a seconder for that? Director Gisborne, are you seconding it?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead. So is there discussion on that item? Director Gisborne?
Yes, one of the pages of this very extensive report that we're sending back to staff, I believe page 138 of 505 on our agenda, it shows community works funding expenditures to December 31st, 2024. It also shows like which electoral area is being allocated under these funds. And if this does go back to staff and this motion passes, the one extra bit of information I would really appreciate is like which year these things were approved or the funding went out, because we're talking about like which funding period. So which ones are, 2024 and after, and then which ones are 2014 to 2024, and then like which ones are say before 2014, because we're talking about like the funding agreements. So our policy says, what's been, spent in the last funding period, but 2007 to 2014 is actually before the last funding period. And that might change some of these figures. So to just help me, I would love to kind of have the dates of which of these service fundings, like when they went out, because as we know, we couldn't use community works funds for fire departments. And as I understand, way back, before 2010, we were very limited on what we could actually spend community works funds on. So there was a lot of things that we funded in different areas because, we had the money and we were going to lose it. And now that the community works funds are far more broad and we can use them for a whole bunch of other things that we actually do need, I think that that is some context that will really help us make decisions when we look at this at the electoral area community works funds services committee, or whatever we want to call it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I'll ask our financial manager, Ms. Greenan, if that's possible. And I believe we've seen that kind of information before. It's probably just, this was to simplify. So would it be possible in the report that would come back to would it be, not too much work, I guess, to add the year that those different initiatives were at least decided in, maybe not completed, but allocated?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, I just want to clarify. So are you talking about like the funds that were spent between 2007 and 2024?
Yes, I believe Director Gisborne's talking about on page 134, the Community Works Fund expenditures to December 31, 2024. Is that that's the table you're looking at?
My paper has page 138 to 505.
Yeah.
And then in the actual page of the report, there's actually a number of numbers, so the printing got screwed up on my feet. Sorry, Chair.
Exactly. So that's right. So that's the table with the service initiative amount in that year and then area. And I guess what Director Gisborne's asking and what I'm trying to ask is, would it be possible to add a column to that table that has the year of that initiative? And is that a lot of work to add? Ms. Greenan, sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
figure
sorry.
out which report exactly, because on
Okay,
mine,
so it's in our current committee agenda
I've got,
on
yeah, I've got
page 130.
I've got 130 pages, sorry.
Oh, right. So I think well, on our full agenda, the 505 page one, the page number of your report's a bit blurred out. It's there's something, but I think it's 134 maybe. It's basically the last page, let's say.
Last
Maybe
page.
it's 130. It's the last page of your report,
Oh.
which has a table with a green bar across Community Works Fund expenditures to December 31, 2024.
Okay, yes, so those are the expenditures between 2007 and 2024.
Yeah.
Those are cumulative numbers that we put together based on every year. So it will take some work to split those out. So you want to know the spending per year for those initiatives.
Yeah, like for example, regional parks, Paget Road Bike Path, $857,000. And I think I remember which year that was, or years.
It was years. It was over a number of years. So it will, yes, it will take some time to split that out.
Yeah. And I just find oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yes, it will take some time.
Okay. I just find that information valuable because, as we know, new funding agreements comes with new criteria, and we're getting more and more flexible on what we can use these funds for. So yeah, that's why I'm very curious.
Okay, and if Director Gisborne's okay, maybe what we're asking for to come back in February doesn't necessarily have that, if that's a lot of work on staff at this super busy time of the year. But when we have the committee, just having that as a wish item or a desire to have that information with at least maybe even if it's the range. I mean, I don't know if Director Gisborne would it be sufficient to even just say say Paget bike path was between 2008 and 2012 or whatever the ranges rather than per year, how much was spent per year. But anyways, we can I think staff understands what the request is.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess so we have a motion on the table. Is there further discussion on the motion on the table? And maybe while I don't see any other hands up, maybe the corporate officer can share, or if she's still typing, put some pressure on on her so that we know exactly what the motion is.
Oh, sorry, I didn't type it out. The motion was to refer the item to staff for
updated numbers per the policy.
Yes, for the unallocated.
Okay. So I think it's pretty straightforward. There's no further discussion then on this. Maybe I'll just call the question. So all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries unanimously. Oh, did Director Elliott have something?
I got confused for a second. It's okay. I'm in favor. I just didn't vote.
Yeah, okay. Well, you're in favor because you didn't vote.
I was wondering if I was supposed to or not, but then I realized.
Yes. Yeah. So that's gone back. So just so we're clear, so now we've taken this whole postponed item. This will help clean it up. We'll have information coming back, get us on a track. We'll be able to talk about it. The committee was in progress. Other information's in progress, and this will advance it a step. I think it's very appropriate. Okay. Very good. Let me get back to my notes because there was too much there. Okay, so we have two items of correspondence on item 7, and I would like to pull both of them. So there's no need for anyone else to pull anything because we're going to pull them both. Item 1, 7.1, which is now 8.1, is correspondence. Let me just pull up the right ones. Correspondence from they're both correspondence from the LCA. So let me just get back. So this first one is about internet. So the Lasqueti Island Community Association is seeking options to bring internet to the community hall. And one of the reasons for that is because when there's event, there is no internet there and there's very poor cell coverage, which makes it very challenging for fire department members to show up to events. All the ones on call, all the first responders, they work among themselves saying, I can't go because there's no coverage if a call comes out and everyone's at the hall. So it's kind of a difficult. They're wanting to look at options, and they reached out to me. They wrote this letter. I have a question actually before doing anything, and I don't actually believe anything needs to be done. So my first question, two questions for the corporate officer. Do we actually need to do anything, or should the LCA just, should we consider this just as a heads up, and that the LCA just includes the request in their budget for the amount that they need? And I asked them, I tried to ask them how much money they're talking about, and they don't actually know a specific number. So I told them that's very, there's nothing for us to decide really until we see a number, but they have to put the LCA's yet to bring forward their annual request for funding. So, if they just added it, so I guess if we just tell them, they just add this to their item and then to their request, and then we'll decide whether that's feasible or not. So maybe I'll just hand it to our corporate officers. Is there anything we need to do on this, or is this just something they would include in their annual budget request?
People refer that to Ms. Greenan.
Or Ms. Greenan could answer, yeah. Ms. Greenan, would that
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. Yes, they could just add this to their annual budget request. And then the board could decide if they wanted to approve that as part of the budget process.
Okay, thank you. So I won't do anything on this or put forward anything. I did email back to them and told them there isn't other pots of money, trying to clarify how regional districts work. There is no other pot of money to give them. There's grants and aid, and there's their contribution agreement, and their contribution agreement is the way it would happen. It would be Lasqueti taxpayers. I don't see Texada taxpayers or Lund taxpayers paying for this. So there's no service that this would go under. So any case, that we don't do anything on that. I'll just move on to the next item, which is that the essence of this is that there's, for those of you that have been to the community hall, there's a wetland right near the hall, and there has been an area accessible from the road that's been dredged out a little bit, dug out a bit to allow some standing water for fire suppression in the summer, and that needs to be done again. And so they're asking basically for, well, they're asking, their operative request is funding for this, the upgrade to do this work, and they've got a number there, 2,000 to 5,000. My question when I received this was whether this would be under the fire department or under the LCA contribution agreement, or emergency preparedness or something. So what I would, maybe I'll ask the corporate officer if it would be appropriate, but what I would like to do, I think, is put forward a motion to just refer this request to staff to, bring forward options on how to address this. So my question to the corporate officer, would that be an appropriate action here, just to send this request to staff and staff bring forward an option for how to do this? Because I don't know, whether that would be financial services or our emergency services, Mr. Toms, to look at whether this is an LIVFD issue. They're the ones who can pump, or is an LCA issue. It's Crown land, so maybe I'll just ask the corporate officer if there's a way, what the best way to deal with this request is.
Thank you so much, Chair. I think that referring it to staff for more information is a good idea.
Okay, so I'll move that the committee recommends to the board to refer the LCA request regarding item 7.2 to staff to consider and report on options, including appropriate service and funding. Seconded by Director Elliott. Is there discussion on this very Lasqueti specific item? Director McCormick?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question actually related to the first item of correspondence, so I'm not sure when it would be appropriate to ask that question.
You can ask it. Well, wait till we vote on this, maybe, if it's separate. So I'll bring that back, because we have a motion on the table now for this referral. So discussion on the referral of this item. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed. That's carried. Okay, Director McCormick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Reading this item of correspondence really hit home with me, because on Texada, our community hall has very poor internet service. We couldn't hold our board meeting there a couple years ago. Cell signal is basically non-existent. I had to go outside to use my cell phone. I couldn't use it inside the hall, yet that building is designated as our emergency response center. So I've mentioned this to the chair of the Texada Recreation Commission, which will be discussing it at their meeting in March. But my question, Chair, is should the Rec Commission make a recommendation that internet and cell signals be made adequate to serve in the event of an emergency reception center being called up. Does that need to be included in this budget when the commission meets in mid-March and our budget will be up for final decision just a week or so later? So would there be time to include funds in our budget? The Rec Commission asks that that be so.
I'll hand that to Ms. Greenan, but I'd say if the Rec Commission, the Texada Island Recreation Commission is seeking for someone else to provide better internet service, that's different from them doing it. If the Turk wants to have funds to improve their internet, then I would assume that would come under their funding request, and then it would be discussed by the board, as long as it would fit. That leads to the question is, does that fit in what's allowed under the contribution agreement? But I'll hand it to Ms. Greenan for specifics on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, through the chair. The Texada Island Recreation Commission is a bit different than the Lasqueti Community Association. The Lasqueti Community Association works under a contribution agreement, and that would include, operating costs for the Lasqueti Community Hall. But the Texada Recreation Commission is a service of the regional district. So if they did want funding for a specific project, that should be communicated to the service manager, Patrick Devereaux. And then he would make sure that is included in the upcoming budget. So I think that might be a question to ask of the manager of operational services.
Okay, thank you. Director McCormick?
Yeah, just if the commission is scheduled to meet in the middle of March, would there be time for them to make a recommendation that could be approved as part of the budget later that month? Is there sufficient time in there for the Rec Commission to make a recommendation and for it to be included in the budget?
Through the chair. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. No, that wouldn't be enough time to get it included in the budget. They would have to make the recommendation in February so that we could include it in the final draft of the budget in March.
They don't meet until March. Okay.
Is there?
So perhaps reach out to Mr. Devereaux and maybe if there's something, we can discuss this in the February meeting, I guess, at Finance Committee. But yeah, if there's no numbers, then that's difficult, and no recommendation. But okay, seeing no other hands up, we'll move on to reports. So item 9.1 is the fees and charges bylaw amendments. What are there any any questions anyone has for staff on this? Director McCormick?
Thank you. Could staff tell me exactly what a comfort letter means?
Very good. Is our planning?
I can only imagine, but
purposes?
it's planning context. I'm trying to think of what a comfort letter.
It's our CPS teeth without teeth.
Is there a staff member on? I don't know if
Staff.
Ms. Rodden is on. Maybe our corporate officer can, or Ms. Greenan can answer. I'm not really sure. Corporate officer?
Thank you. Ms. Rodden is here now, so.
Oh, Ms. Rodden is here. Okay, great.
Hi, through the chair, could you please repeat that question?
The question is, what is a comfort letter?
Oh, what is a comfort letter? Okay, good question. That's something that the planning department prepares quite often. It comes at the request of property owners and financial institutions. So when people are applying for a mortgage or a business loan, they often need a letter that gives assurance that what they're building or what they're developing is in line with local government bylaws.
Oh, okay.
And that's a comfort letter.
Great. Dr. McCormick, carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Rodden. That explains that. There's one other point I guess I'd like to raise, and that is the third bullet in the recommendation is asking to add a fee of, and that number is blank. So when I read the report, I think option 2 is preferred option because it's more likely that we would have less use of an EV charger at the park than they would say in the city. So I believe the figure of 250 per hour was mentioned in the report, so I would put that figure in that way. And I don't know if
Thank
that
you.
has to be a separate motion or.
Well, we'll do questions first, and then when we get to a motion, but you're quite right that we can't pass the motion as worded. We need to fill in the X. So, so we'll do a round of questions first and clarification, and then maybe I'll ask you to put forward a motion if that's what your desires. Director Lennox, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for not asking us that emotion. Obviously, I think just reading the report, the most immediate effect is Texada and Thomond Parks and our new charging station was great to see. I just have a couple of questions. And just first blush, I am a proponent of all of our services trying to pay for all of their costs and not subsidizing that through parks or other services. So I appreciate the comments around, what is it, $2 versus $2.50 per hour versus $3.25 per hour. And I guess I'd ask our staff, have we got any data coming from those units? That's the first question. We're doing some guesstimation here of 400 hours, I guess it is, in Lund. Sorry, I borrowed some cheaters. Thanks, Dad. And then 600 for Texada. Obviously making some revenue assumptions, and I have a second question around the management fees, quite honestly. I really appreciate this because I wondered how much do we pay for X, how much does hydro charge us, and all these questions. So the report is actually very educational for people who are wondering what is the costs and revenue with these stations. So my point is, these are the current management fees, which seem, I don't know, significant, I guess. And then are these written in stone, or do we have any opportunity to see some reduction in the management fees specifically for these two stations?
So our manager of assets is on the call, maybe on the meeting, I should say. Perhaps he might address those questions.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, through the chair, the management fees from Flow are set, they're established, and that is for kind of all of the administrative effort to manage the station, monitor usage statistics, monitor kind of any service levels, required service. So they are set fees, and every EV charger station, including all the ones in the city, pay the same management fee per station. So they are set and they're established. So there wouldn't be any reduction in those fees.
And maybe just that first question, do we have any data, or I guess you may have some access, and subsequently, what does 325 give an average EV vehicle as far as a charge? Like if you're going to come to Lund and you think, okay, everybody's on a budget, what's that 325 you're going to stay for an hour? Do we have any idea? Like, is that a good deal, bad deal? Do we have any idea of that? Value of that?
Thanks, Chair.
That's a big one.
They range from $2 an hour, which is what the city is charging currently, to $5 an hour. So there is quite a range. It's all depending on who's supplying the service. What we've looked at, this $3.25 would cover the cost. But again, this is a complete estimate. The usage statistics that we have actually are sort of derived from numbers that were presented or provided to us by the city of Powell River. Their stations on average run about 800 hours per year, which at their $2 rate, they are able to cover their costs, and they actually realize a little bit of revenue out of these stations. We really don't know. We're kind of taking a shot in the dark right now as to the projected usage. So yeah, we're just trying to establish something to start off, and then after a year, we'll be able to see what our annual usage at each one of these sites are.
So Director Brander and then Director Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. Just from personal experience, I've driven an electric car for 9 years. 75 cents, meaning from 250 up to 325. That's not going to make any difference whether I use it or not. I think 325, if staff is projecting that that's going to cover the expenses, that's what I'm in support of.
Thank you.
Director Elliott.
Thank you.
And then Director Southcott.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the city's rationale for having a fee at all. We were finding that folks would plug in and not and plug up that space. and not care that their car was maybe charged and was in the way of someone else who might want to charge. And so by putting a fee on it, people are paying more attention to how long they're there. And so the point of it was not, because electricity cost is relatively low, and it's not really about cost recovery for us. It was about trying to influence people to behave more considerately when it came to the limited amount of spaces for charging cars. And some remote areas don't have a lot of people trying to charge their cars, and so it might not be an issue. And the implementing a system that requires extra costs for other things should probably be balanced with whether you're actually having an issue or not. So that was just my feedback on that. Not all stations are having an issue with people not getting out of the way for the next person. And so in the city, we were having that problem. I don't know that that's a problem everywhere.
Thank you, Director Southcott, and then I'll add myself on.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to address the same thing Director Elliott just did, and I do have another question, but it's not about this specific issue, the charging fees in this bylaw. So I'll wait if that's appropriate.
It may be, but okay, and I'll add my comments. I mean, I hear what Director Brander's saying. I think the difference, these are having remote charging stations would be very much appreciated by anyone with an electric car. There's no way someone who's up in London says, "Oh, gee, I need to charge my car. Maybe I'll cross my fingers, go down to the city and save, $2." People charging electric cars at either of these rates are paying way less for a charge than people filling up petrol. So it's a savings no matter what. That said, I'm not, I'm not worried either way, because maybe there would be some people, but seems unlikely. The difference is small, and the two, I would cast this in a context. Either way, we're talking about small numbers, minus $82 versus plus $300. And the operative sentence, and Director Lennox landed on it, staff do not have reliable estimates of how much usage the EV charging stations will see at either place. That's what our manager said. And the other is staff will assess usage in the first year. So we're going to get data. So I'm not going to advocate for either of the charging rates. I think setting a charging rate, collecting data, and assess, and that's the first year. I would expect that assessment will be ongoing, because as time goes on, I think the desire ideally would be that the service pays for itself, that it's not that other people aren't subsidizing it who aren't using it. But if it's a subsidy of $80 or a profit of $300, I mean, I think there's bigger ways to worry about this in the budget. But so I'm not going to advocate for either of the options. Director Lennox, I think, and then Director McCormick.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to move option 1.
Second.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Is discussion on that, Director Lennox and then Director McCormick?
Yeah, appreciate all the comments, and I do. It's sort of a negligible amount, and back to that, if that's the anticipated cost, let's charge that and see what the data is down the road.
Director McCormick.
Thank you. Mike, actually, I have another question, and that was regarding the annual replacement reserve. $600 seems a bit excessive, given that we're only talking about projected revenue of 1,600 to go into reserve. Is there any way that can be brought down a little bit?
Mr. Drozovich.
Thanks, Chair. Through the chair, the rate of $600 for the reserve is for a 20-year period to replace the station, and that's the full cost to replace these stations. You got to remember, these are grant-funded stations, 100%, and we're talking a total of about $70,000 for 2 stations. So they are significant in cost to replace, and we wanted to ensure we would have enough in reserves after a 20-year period to replace these without additional cost.
Right. So but that's still an annual expense, is the $600. Even though it might not
it's a fee to the reserve.
Right. That's an annual fee, though.
Yeah. It's an annual transfer to reserves.
Thank you. That's just my question.
Okay, I'll add myself on. I see Director Gisborne. Just to clarify on that. So, I mean, I don't have a question, but really the users of these systems will benefit greatly. I think this raises a point we haven't discussed yet. They're grant funded, as our manager just said. So that's by the numbers, I would say $12,000 about, it's in that ballpark that we don't have to pay. If we were installing these at the cost of the service, the amounts that we would need to requisition would be far insubstantial. So that argues towards the option on the table. The replacement, proper asset management means we're going to have to replace these when, in a reasonable time frame. So 20 years, divide by 20, $600. That will go to reserves. So that's a fairly modest amount given that the upfront costs are being covered. And I think that's a real benefit to the user. So their fees. So in other words, I would say the 325 is even much lower than it would be if we were taking this initiative on our own, on our own dollars, trying to raise taxes for this. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of things. First of all, the letter of comfort, at first I saw, was it 750 up to 50? Looks like a big jump, but it isn't really, because the 750 is quarter hour. So that's kind of more of like $30 an hour going to 50. And then I took a look at some of the other regional districts and municipalities and their letter of comfort costs, and $50 is on the low end. To answer the question as I understand of what is a letter of comfort, the way I've described it is it's kind of like a way our OCP has teeth without it actually having teeth. I do believe there was a delegation a couple of years ago. They wanted to do a resort or something like that on a property that wasn't designated as a resort. And they came into our planning committee asking for a letter of comfort, because otherwise the banks wouldn't give them money and they couldn't get insurance and things like that. And it was not consistent with their OCP. So it's this interesting way of, having our OCP have teeth without us having like an enforcement bylaw. So I really do actually like the way the letter of comfort system works. And yeah, doing appropriate cost recovery, I'm fine with. 10%, $10 application fee, that's fine. The per hour use of electric vehicle charging stations, most of my questions have been answered already. But one of the questions that I had that I think would actually make more sense in the municipality is there an idle fee, or is there any option for an idle fee? And that's where, like, once your car is charged, I think BC Hydro says you got 5 minutes to disconnect. Otherwise, you start getting charged per minute for it to be sitting there connected. Is that anything that's been considered here? I don't think it really matters because it's a rural area, but is that something that we've seen in other areas, or is that just like a BC Hydro thing?
Mr. Drostovich.
Thanks, Chair. Through the chair. The Flow EV charging stations charge by the minute. So it's from the time that you connect to the time that you disconnect, and that's charged, and it's factored into that rate of whichever per hour that the board or the committee chooses.
Okay, so even if their vehicle is finished charging, if they're still connected, they're still paying. Is that understand?
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, no, that's wonderful. And then my very last question is, I noticed the motion says, and that the proposed bylaw be forwarded to the January 13th board meeting for first reading through adoption. That's today. Is there like a need for it? Like, does it have to be done today, or I'm just kind of curious, because usually we kind of give it that 2 weeks of sober second thought.
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. Yes, this bylaw, for some reason, it was missed. It was prepared for the October board meeting or finance committee meeting, and it somehow got missed on the agenda, and we just realized it. So we would like these in place as soon as possible, because the charging station at the Klom and Lund Gazebo Park is now ready for use.
Okay. That answers all my questions. Thank you very much, Chair. That's it for me.
Thank you. And I just want to confirm what motion we have on the table in relation to Director Southcott's question, because I realized, so Director Lennox, you made the motion. Was that just for option for the charging station, or was it for the whole motion with filling in the XX with $3.25?
Well, I think that was the only missing part of the equation, but
Yeah.
Any other directors before,
Right. So I believe I understood it to be the whole motion with the option one for the. So that's what I understood, and I think that the reason it occurred to me is I thought, well, Director Southcott had a question related to other aspects, and I think should have an opportunity to address that now before we vote on the whole thing. So go ahead, Director Southcott.
Thank you, Chair. Not a very crucial question. I was just wondering how many floppy disks or computer tapes have been provided recently. I was just reading the FOI information, FOI charges here. That was pretty curious to actually see, and I realize it's based on regulation, but like, wow, how many decades is this out of date? That was,
Corporate
I was
officer?
wondering if, because really the question that I have in my mind, and I don't know if this is a question that can really be answered, but if you know, if it's this out of date, then how out of date are the charges allowed for by regulation relative to covering the expenses of staff doing this FOI work? That's my real curiosity. I suspect I know the answer, so it's sort of half rhetorical.
I think that's in the domain of our corporate officer who loves doing these, I'm sure.
Speaking of cost per service.
Yeah. The cost of providing FOI services is quite high. For example, recent FOI cost $7,000 and zero of it was recoverable through fees.
Sorry, I asked that.
Did you want to know? Does that answer your question, Director
Yes,
Southcott?
it definitely does. Thank you very much, Chair. This is something the public needs to know. It's like really brutal. Sorry.
Yeah, well, they're important, but they, ask carefully because they cost. Director Elliott.
Thank you. I'm in favor of the application fee. I think the public will probably have some things to say about it. They might feel that it's unfair or some such thing, but frivolous or people just doing FOIs without thinking about them first, this might help with that. My question, I guess, I'm in favor of the motion. My question is it permissible under FOI for us to report out publicly on what each FOI request costs, or is that not?
Corporate officer.
Thank you, through the chair. I think it's important to understand how much providing that service, legislated service, cost. I don't know that we would be able to single out. But I do think it's important to really understand that even a cost, so the last item I referenced was not, there is so much work that's done on a freedom of information request that you are not allowed to charge for. So even if that, that last one totaled more than 40 something hours, and most of that work was unable to be charged for. And so I think it's important to know, because people don't understand that it does cost a significant amount of money to receive that information. The Corporate Services Department has been making real efforts to try to provide information to people in a way that won't require all of that work. And so that's where our efforts at savings are going.
Go ahead.
I'm here to say that we could report out on the cost of the overall service and maybe how many requests we've had. So, but not that this particular request costs this much and this one costs that one. So when we do our annual reporting, do we do that now?
Corporate officer.
Thank you, through the chair. No, we don't currently do it. It is very nuanced. For example, a freedom of information request from 2022 or 2023 can still cost a significant amount of money in 2026. So it's hard to really break down. We've had 7 requests and the total cost is this. We can probably break it down over time, but the cost is significant, I think.
Okay, so I don't think it's relevant to this particular motion in that, except for that we might get some revenue to offset. But when would be the appropriate time for our committee or our board to ask us to include that in our annual reporting, some kind of roll up of costs affiliated with that legislated service?
Corporate officer.
Thank you, through the chair. That could be introduced as an item of new business, like a notice of motion. If anyone wants assistance in prepping that for a future meeting, just reach out. Relative to this item, specifically, is we were seeing, you know, multiple applications for information from same people, trying to really break it down so it stayed under the 3-hour mark. So this would sort of force people to have to apply through a $10 fee to request for information. A drop in the bucket, but really does sort of put the brakes on of how important it is to go through that process.
Okay, so we've had a good discussion on this item. Is there any other last burning things? Seeing none, then I think I'll call a question on that, which is the motion as in the agenda with the XX replaced with $3.25. So all those in favor of the motion? None opposed, that carries unanimously. Very good. So we're now on to item 9.2, which is the Texada Island Recreation Commission Capital Project. Director McCormick.
Thank you. I have a slightly amended motion. So I would move the motion as it's written on our agenda with the deletion of the word funding, that the committee recommends to the board that the board approve requests for the following, and then at the end I would add to be funded through community works. And
okay, so right. Okay, so the motion is to approve requests for the following projects, and then list the project to be funded through CWF,
yes,
through Community Works Fund. Okay.
And if there's a
Is there a second? Is there a seconder for that motion, Director Lennox? Okay, discussion on that, Director McCormick.
Thank you. Although the costs are projected to come out of our reserves, that's reserve that ultimately Area D taxpayers would have to pay to replace. So rather than burden Area D taxpayers further, this project is eligible for community works funding. And we've had very little in the way of community work funding coming to Area D. I see our CIOs.
I think I know what he's going to say.
Okay.
So that's why I would like to see it come from community works rather than taxpayers.
CAO.
Through the chair, staff will accept whatever the board says and approves. I just want you to be cautioned that I'm sure Linda Greenan, our manager of financial services, will do her utmost to make sure that each one of these is eligible under CWF.
Okay, thank you, CAO.
Cautionary about that is if they're ineligible or one or two are ineligible, then you're going to be short in your, well, you won't be short, but we will then have to revert back to reserves.
Okay, Director Gisborne.
Yes. God, it feels like forever ago, or it might have been an hour ago. I believe we had a discussion around our community works funds policy, and as I mentioned, I'm very keen to have the assembly consider the Myrtle Pond well number 2 that needs replacement for community works funds. However, with our newly adopted community works funds policy, these projects are supposed to be considered by the new committee that's being formed for community works. So I'm wondering if this motion is even in order at this assembly, or if it should be referred to the new committee that has not been named yet.
Well, I guess I wouldn't rule it out of order per se, because we can, it's not out of order for Robert's rules, but I would say that, it is an option for the board to consider referring it to the new committee. That would be an appropriate way to deal with that if so desired.
Yeah, because I would love to support it, because I think Texada has kind of not gotten a lot of funding over the last 20-odd years. However, we did just adopt this new policy, and I'd hate to set a precedent where we are approving capital works, community works funds projects without using our new policy. And
sorry, are you making that motion to refer it?
Yeah, I'll move that we refer this item to the committee that has not yet been named.
Yet to be named. Okay, is there a seconder for that referral, Director Lennox? And discussion on the referral then, Director McCormick and then Director Elliott.
Thank you, but I actually had a follow-up question for my first question, and that was to ask staff if the projects that are contemplated, electrical improvements, flooring, et cetera, if they qualify under community works. So,
Ms. Greenan?
would they qualify?
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. I think they might, I'm just not sure about the fencing replacement at the Sandpipers preschool, but I'll have to check the policy and we may have to ask the UBCM for approval, just to be sure.
Director McCormick?
Well, then is it possible to move approval of one item and not the others, or?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, what you potentially could do is leave the motion as is and then say and that the projects be considered for community works in the 2026 budget planning process.
Okay, I'm happy to do that.
No, I'll point out that the motion on the table is to refer this to the new committee. So I don't think we can change that motion of referral, but we can't change the motion being referred because that's not what's on the table.
Okay, well, would we have to withdraw the motion to refer and then amend that motion to include the phrase that Ms. Greenan just said about adding community works to the end?
Well, I think the referral to the new committee would automatically put it in consideration for Community Works Fund because that's what that committee would exist for. So if that committee receives something, it would be to consider those projects for Community Works Fund. So it would automatically happen. Director McCormick and then I got a list: Director Lennox, then Director Gisborne, and then Director Elliott. So go ahead, Director McCormick.
But if we approve the motion as it's written with the addition, it does mean that the projects, funding for the projects is approved and we will try to get community works funding. But one way it's approved as of the board meeting that approves it. The other way it goes to February and maybe March or whatever. So I would prefer to do as Ms. Greenan suggested and approve the motion that's in the report with the addition rather than referring it to a different yeah. That's my
right.
comment.
I mean, I understand that, but we'd have to change the process. I mean, the motion on the table is to refer. So unless the mover would like to, by unanimous consent, pull that, but I think we'll have other people on the list first. I mean, another option, Director McCormick, would be to, if the referral went forward to the new committee, that the main motion could be considered, and I'd ask a question, would it be then in order for the main motion to be considered again, just without anything? So it's going to be approved. Maybe that's not what, forget it. I don't know if that's what Director McCormick wants. Let me go. I won't try to overly complicate this. Right now we have the motion in the agenda being referred to the committee for considering Community Works Fund, and Director Lennox is next on the list.
Thanks. I think it was actually Director Hilary, but just briefly, let's refer it to the committee that we just talked about is going to consider these items. We'll make that decision to give us another chance. And I hear the director, it's one way or the other. You need to get the job done here, and I respect that. And our staff understands the intent of applying whatever they can to those three items. So I think we can move ahead, refer it, but also get the job done is my hope. Sure.
Director Elliott.
My suggestion was going to be similar. I think the safest thing for Texada is to approve the motion that staff put forward that doesn't talk about community works, and then also forward it to community works, because you could have it in the budget, and then if it does get covered by community works, whenever you get around to that, you won't be spending that budget. It'll move over to community works. You'll have a surplus over there that you can deal with at that time any way you need to. And so that would be the safest get it done way to do things. And so that would require withdrawing this particular one to refer, and also maybe defeating your original motion, going back to the one that was proposed by staff.
Thank you, Director Elliott, for clarifying. I see Director Gisborne, and I don't even know if we need to defeat this, because I think it would personally, I mean, and maybe our corporate officer can clarify. If this referral was done, and that would set it in motion to go to that committee, would it be in order to also pass at this committee the motion in the agenda that would basically just say it's going to be funded? It just leaves open, you know, whether that's funded by Community Works Fund or through taxation, the Turk service.
So the wording of the motion that's being referred says to be funded through Community Works Fund.
Correct.
So you could table the motion to refer, amend the main motion, and then bring the referral motion back in front. That's how I would deal with it procedurally. It would be the easiest, I think. Or withdraw. Everybody unanimously agrees to withdraw the referral and withdraw the main motion and then propose a new motion.
Okay, so what's I guess first I'll ask is, does everyone, does anyone disagree with withdrawing the motion all the way back to nothing, both motions, and then we start fresh on this and try to go forward? Or do we want to continue and vote on the motion to refer? So I'll ask basically straw poll. If anyone disagrees with withdrawing both motions, let me know now. Otherwise, we will start this whole process fresh and maybe look forward to and I'll start. I know Director Gisborne was next on the list, but I'll go back to Director McCormick and maybe give an opportunity to if we make the motion in the agenda and then make a subsequent motion to refer consideration of CWF to the new committee. Maybe that's the cleanest way. Director McCormick?
Thank you, and I'd be happy to do that. Would that be as an or would that be two separate motions?
Corporate Officer?
Thank you. Ms. Greenan had suggested motions where we use this one and then an and to be considered for CWF funds. And then that, I believe, once we establish that committee, would go to the committee for consideration.
Okay, thank you then, Chair. I would move that.
Seconded.
Thank you. Seconded. And just to be clear, and I think this is, of course, our first time referring something to the committee, and it's sort of setting up the process. So I think maybe the question I would have for the corporate officer, if we, in the future, whenever something comes up for CWF, sounds like the wording we would use if we add that clause that's been proposed, then, or that's on the table, then that would send it to that committee. Corporate Officer?
I should have used the word refer in the second clause, and to be referred to the committee.
And to be referred to, okay.
I think that
so whenever we see that, we should just know that's what whatever committee or board, if it's on a board agenda, that wording is in the motion. That means it goes through the policy to that new committee and then back up through the system. So we're good on that. Director Gisborne, go ahead.
That's my understanding of how do we want to do this? What I'm thinking is very similar to the Myrtle Pond thing. We approve the project, and I believe that's what the motion is before us, is that we're approving the project. We're going to go forward with it. And the second part of the motion is that when this Community Works Funds Committee gets formed, that this will be a project that will be considered for funding from Community Works Funds. And I believe that's my understanding of what's going on. Is that correct? Okay, good. That was what and that's where we had that motion refer. That was my intent. I'm not trying to, kill a project or anything. So I'm happy with the direction that we're going now. And I look forward to having that discussion over at the Community Works Funds Committee. And just a follow-up question. I know I've talked about the Myrtle Pond well. Do we need a motion from this committee to have that considered, or could I just send an email to staff and say, hey, when we have that committee, I'd like it to be considered?
Maybe a corporate officer can. So the question is, how do things get put on the agenda for the new, yet to be formed, unnamed committee?
Our procedure bylaw deals with how items can be submitted for agenda consideration. So yes, it could be referred from a committee, but it does not necessarily need that.
That's what I suspected. Thank you, Chair. No further comments at this time.
Okay, and I'll just add one last comment, which is really, I think there's going to be a general comment. There's going to be two situations. One is where we have projects we want to do anyways, and yet we want to consider CWF funds, and that's what we have before us here. So this is, I think, the right process where we're saying this two-part clause or motion that says we're going to do the project and then we're going to consider Community Works Fund, and then the committee will decide whether that project gets part or in whole funded from CWF within the limits of what's available and targets and policy. And the other situation is where we might have a project that we only want to do if it's from CWF, in which case the motion would look a little different, and we wouldn't have that first part. We would just refer the whole thing to that committee, and it would go through the process. And if we didn't agree on CWF, the project wouldn't happen, and that's what the desire is. So we got the former case here. So we're hopefully good on what we're doing here. I think we found our way through. CAO.
For clarification on recording purposes, I believe Director McCormick moved the new main motion. Who seconded it? Okay.
Director Lennox. Oh, thank you.
Got a referral motion, or is that in the main motion?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's in the main motion. So the main motion is as in the agenda with an and then refer consideration of CWF to the new committee. However, the specific good wording the corporate officer would come up with. Is that clear what we're doing? Okay, is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none, then I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. And I just like to say, I think we stumbled a bit there, but I think it's good because we're trying to figure out how to apply the new policy. And once we get a bit of a process in place, we'll be clear on how these things proceed. And I think it'll be, good and become smoother. Okay, so that's good. We're on to item 9.3, and that one is the 2026 Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Emergency Operations Center and Training Grant Funding. Director Lennox?
Yeah, I move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder for that? Director Southcott, is there discussion on that? Director Lennox, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just quickly for staff. I think we see this on a regular basis. I think I understand that's the process. $30,000 per approved application. Not a lot of money these days. What's the true cost of these efforts that we do? Does it ebb and flow, and we anticipate being able to get any more money if we're, if we're sort of subsidizing it in general? I don't know if you understand what I'm getting at there, Mr. Toms.
Mr. Toms, do you
yeah, through the chair, sure. The funding 30,000 will cover 100% of the contracted costs of our evacuation planning assistant, who's also been leading our emergency operations center training. There is certainly some background and other administrative costs that we don't capture. More broadly, to the latter part of your question, the UBCM funding from the province has scaled back a little bit. Some of these grants were 40,000 last year. Now they're down to 30. If that's a harbinger of things to come, I don't know, but we run it very tight.
Thanks for the reminders on some of that.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the question. I do, I'll just add myself on. I agree that there is staff cost, and I assume, I'll trust our staff that that overhead is worth the effort to both apply for the grant and the second piece, which is overall grant management. So the costs of the project are covered, and will cost something to put the project into place. But I think staff wouldn't be applying for it wouldn't ask for it to be applied if it didn't make sense. Okay, so is there further discussion on this item? Seeing none, then I will call the question. Director Southcott, did you have a?
Yeah, I just have a quick comment. From my operations background, it's not just the training, but this is team building as well very often. The work that's done here, having benefited from it over in previous years, I was always highly impressed by the value of this kind of training, and very appreciative in my provincially paid for role in this community, but it's highly worthwhile in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. So seeing no other hands up, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, not opposed, carried unanimously. Okay, item 9.4, Next Generation 91911 grant application. Director Lennox.
Yeah, I move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder, Director McCormick? Is there discussion, Director Lennox?
Yeah, thanks. Probably to the same person here. Appreciate that. Looking at the report, thank you. $45,000. Mobile CAD for folks out there is, I think, a big improvement for the departments that don't have them. So computer automated dispatch, which is excellent. Maybe for staff, I understand the different apparatus in my area. Is this one unit for the main responding engine, the first responder unit, multiple units? I think you understand my question is like, what capabilities does this give us in the field? Thanks.
Mr. Thoms?
Through the chair, if successful, this would put a tablet or some other similar type device in all of the fire department apparatus. So whichever one is responding has access to the computer aided dispatch system and the information therein.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick follow-up, I guess all this is also tied in with what we've been learning about next generation 911 and all those capabilities.
Mr.
Through the
Thoms?
chair, that's a requirement in the grant, is that the project would bring next gen 911 capabilities to the fire department.
Thank you.
Okay, so any further debate on this? Seeing no hands up, the motion's on the table. I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that carries. Okay, so now we're on to item 9.5, which is our grant and aid funding level. So maybe I'll first offer a round of, I see Director Gisborne, so we can have some questions unless we want to put a motion forward, but go ahead, Director Gisborne.
Can I request a bio break until 2:35?
You're talking about our actual physical structure. Yes, we can have a bio break to 2:35, 5-minute, 6-minute bio break.
Thank you, Chair.
Good idea.
Recording stopped.
Rob was my boss. You didn't hear that.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order after a short break, 2:38. So we're back onto item 9.5, which is the 2026 grants and aid funding levels. Director Gisborne.
Yes, I read the report. I do recall Area E, we put as $12,000 in December. Area B, I know shows up in a few spots. Just want to let everyone know that last year there were 2 extra expenditures from Area B. One was, I believe, the Lang Bay Community Hall, where I was like, yeah, I'd love to offer like a 25% addition. And then there was also the trail riders, where I also added additional funds from Area B. So with that being said, I would be very comfortable with a 5% increase for Area B, which would take Area B's contribution requisition from 20,000 to 21,000. And if it's acceptable with the Assembly, I would move that we set Area B's budget at 21,000 for 2026. So I'll make that motion.
Is there a seconder for that motion, Director Lennox? Okay, so this is just a piece of this overall motion, which we can confirm when we do the overall thing. So discussion on moving 21,000 for Area B. Director Gisborne, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that anomaly. I said, no, I'm not going to fund Lang Bay and I'm not going to fund trail riders from Area B specifically, there would have still been money in Area B's grant and aid. And on top of that, therefore, what option 3, which is, 5% above actuals, and then kind of like doing that rounding would result in 22,000. And looking at, some historical context, I think 5%, I know it seems like a lot, but it really isn't in 2026. So I'm happy with 21,000, and I doubt there's going to be the unique circumstances that we had in 2025. And with that, if everyone is comfortable, then what other electoral areas want for their electoral area grant and aid, I'm happy to hear out and happy to support. But yeah, 21,000, I think I'm very comfortable with from Area B's grant and aid. It's an increase. It's not a flat. I'm happy. Yeah, we go along with it. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this motion? And just to be clear, if we do this, then I think we could either do them all separate, or we could do the motion for the package could just exclude Area B if we do this one on its own. Okay, so discussion on the Area B amount of 21,000. Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed, that carries. Okay, I saw Director McCormick.
Thank you. And I would move that from electoral area D, that it be 19,000 and not 20. And if it's seconded, I will speak.
Okay, go ahead, Director McCormick.
Okay, the actuals for 2025 were 18,338. Adding 5% to that is 19,255. So my understanding of the principle of rounding is that you round up or you round down, depending on if it reaches halfway or not. And because it doesn't, 19,255, I believe, should be rounded to 19,000, not 20,000. And so that is my reason for proposing that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so is there any other discussion on 19,000 for Area D? Seeing no other hands up, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, that carried. Okay, now if we were to make another motion, we wouldn't include areas B and D because we just did that, so there's no point for redundancy. What's the will of the committee for the other items? No one wants to move anything? Director Elliott?
I'll move the main motion excluding areas D and B.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that, Director McCormick? Okay, discussion on that. Director Gisborne, and then I'll add myself on. Go ahead, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, there's 3 options in the package. I'm just curious as to which option's being moved.
The one proposed in the package.
It's the one in the agenda. So 101,000 for general, 80,000 for Area A, 31 for Area C, and 12 for Area E.
Okay.
That's option 3, I guess, consistent with option 3, 5% above actuals, rounded. Okay, I'll add myself, and I'll just make a short note, and then Director Lennox. I just want to clarify Area E. Area E was a little bit tricky last year because there was the request from the Last Resort Society for money for capital expenditure from to the regional district hospital district. That was only partially funded, and then we chose to increase the Area E grants and aid up to accommodate funding a request from the Last Resort, which we did. So the actual amounts last year had that extra amount in it, and it didn't really make sense to add to continue with that, which is why I made the motion last December. So the underlying amount was around 11%. So plus 5% is about rounding up. It rounds it up to 12,000, so it's consistent with that, going with the 11,000 from last year. So I'm fine leaving Area E at that level. Director Lennox, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just mainly a comment about of course, I've had a thought process around Area A. Quite significant grant money available historically in my term, anyways, and when I looked at sort of leveraging that, should I reduce it, increase it, etc.? I just look at the tax per average home, and it really didn't change that much. That being said, just for my residents, gonna try to maintain sort of where we're at now, but really look hard at next term, if it's me or somebody else, but really like how we've been spending those funds. It's nice to have highly valued properties that allow us to spend proportionately more in Area A. And I guess along the same thought lines, that making say a significant decrease really isn't a significant decrease in our taxation, but it does there's a lot of power in the money that we can distribute in the community when we do this. So that's kind of the process I went through. I had some other notes I didn't bring with me. I forgot my glasses. It's been a good day, but again, right, like when I looked at a significant decrease, I'm only gonna put in say 60,000 instead of 80. Well, that takes away from a lot of I think benefit we're giving the community for a small movement in people's taxation. So that's kind of where I'm at now, but I'm learning. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And I'll just, if you may permit me, I'll add a little bit on Area A, because I'd thought about that. So just for the public, the amount that we budgeted last year was 84,000. So this is a decrease to 80. Small adjustments make sense, because a big adjustment, because the way the grants are tied together, we got to be careful with big adjustments. We got to monitor, because otherwise that might limit the ability to do shared things. And the other aspect that I point out is that this is on the table on page 415, which is page 172 of our agenda. The surplus, so Area A has about $8,000 surplus, which means the amount goes from 84 last year to 80, but then it'll actually only be 72 because of the surplus. So it's actually, already dropping. The amount of taxes will be lower. The budget would be 80. So it's kind of a bit of mitigation there of taxes, but incremental. Director Elliott.
Thank you. So grants and aids is one of our most powerful tools for keeping government small. So if our area requires services that are currently being funded through nonprofits, they're generally delivered well, grassroots driven, and to provide those services in a different way where government has to do it is generally quite a bit more expensive and would cost taxpayers a lot of money. So the balance around grants in aid versus tax dollars, to me, is a no-brainer. The more you put into grants and aid, the less tax people are going to be paying for those services that they're getting. And so I'm a big fan of grants and aid, not because it's fun to give money away, but because it helps us keep government small and taxes down. And so investing a small amount of taxes into our nonprofit organizations and the services they provide helps us have an area with lots of services that are flexible, that we get to contribute some opinion about what is valued by our community members without having to provide those services directly through government. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind when we're looking at these budgets.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. And then I have one more comment. I'll add myself on the list. Go ahead, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I support a lot of what Director Elliott said, and one of the things that when I look at general grant and aid, that what is this, $101,000? I believe last year it was around 90. I know it's in the report. I'm not on that page, and I know that last year though we were oversubscribed for general grant and aid, and I'm just wondering the opinion of the assembly. Do we want to increase general grant and aid so that we avoid the same problem that we had last year and I think the year before, where general grant and aid becomes oversubscribed, and then we have to start, cutting down other grants from general grant and aid in order to try and give some fairness to everyone. And then sometimes we have to start kind of picking the pockets of individual electoral areas, which I think has happened in some previous years. And I'm just curious, are we comfortable with 101,000, or do we want to increase that for some of the potential increases, or even some of the same requests that we had last year? And also to kind of tag on to Director Lennox, yeah, Area A at $80,000, where Area B is only 21. Over the weekend I took a look at like the assessed value of like the different electoral areas, and then did like an assessed value per person. And Area A's assessed value per person was something like 3 times Area B's. So that's where sometimes we have some of these discrepancies where, $10,000 less for say Area A doesn't really make that much of a difference, but yet 10,000 for say Area B makes more of a difference because there's not a lot of high value properties in Area B. We don't have any like big run of the river projects. But yeah, so that's where it's a little different. And my big question to the assembly is, are we happy with 101,000, and are we going to then expect that we're going to become oversubscribed again when people come and ask? Or do we want to change that? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, and I have a couple comments related to just the amounts. We've for the last number of years, and going back quite a few years, we pretty much kept grants flat, and so I'm glad that we start to add in inflation, and I actually think that we should every year consider an increase in inflation, because at a minimum, because if we add inflation, all of this, as Director Elliott's pointed out, these are good services that we help support, and their costs go up with inflation. So the amount we can expect, the amount they request or the amount they need goes up with inflation. It just makes sense that this goes up with inflation along with everything else. I'll leave it to the assembly to discuss what Director Gisborne just raised, but I think at least raising that amount by 5% increases the amount available. I also think tying it to the actuals makes some sense too, because that's how we can converge on the amount that's related to what's actually spent, especially the differences between electoral areas, because some areas have a lot of local groups funded entirely from their area and some are shared. And I think that's the way that converges over time. So I'll just leave it there, but I do think increasing, I'm glad to see it going up a bit. That's last year general was 96,000. So this would be adding 5,000 more on that amount. So at least it's a bit of an increase. Okay, so is there any other discussion? Director Lennox.
Yeah, sorry, maybe just for staff, because I just happened upon it here on page 9 of 15 of our report. It might be a typo under the Savior Island Land Trust for last year. Did we give them 18,000 or 8,000? Maybe that's supposed to be 8,000. And a 3-year agreement, if I remember. I can't remember. And maybe you can get back to me on that one, but I just saw that and I was like, I don't remember.
Right. Okay. Well, if it's not, Ms. Green, is that something you had? Or do you want time to send that to Director Lennox?
Thank you,
Go
Chair.
ahead, Ms. Green.
Yes, I'll look that up and send out a director's notification.
Okay. Now, in relation to the amounts, this will go to the board, of course. So if desired, they can always be adjusted there. Okay, so seeing no other hands up, I will then call the question on the motion, which is just for general A, C, and E. Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? None opposed, carried unanimously. Okay, we're on to item 9.
Chair.
Oh, Director, sorry, Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to let you know that I did look that up, and Yes, we gave the Sierra Island Land Trust $8,000 through the agreement, and then we gave them an additional $10,000 in
Yes.
intake number 1.
Now I remember. Thank you. Separate, yeah, thank you, thanks.
Thank you.
Excellent. Good, because that's related to the information, the thing we just passed. That's great. Okay, item 9.6 is just the security issuing bylaw, Resource Recovery Center Waste Transfer Station. First, I guess I'm sure there might be some questions. Maybe if anyone has any questions on this, Director Gisborne, and I have a question. I'll add my name on the list. Go ahead, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. So my understanding is this is that item from September of like 2024, maybe. That's kind of been bounced around, and we had the Community Works Funds discussion, and everything's approved in order to actually borrow this money. The money's been spent, and the question we have to ask ourselves is how long of a term do we want to say take out this loan? Is that my correct understanding? This isn't any new debt. This isn't any new funding. So if someone's like, what, you're still spending money? No, we're not spending more money. Is that a correct understanding?
Ms. Greenan?
Yes, thank you, Chair, through the chair. Yes, the money is already being spent to the end of December 31st. And the borrowing was already approved. This is just, you're correct. Now we're just asking the committee, what would you like to recommend for the borrowing term?
Okay, and as I understand from the Municipal Finance Authority, we get like 10-year lock-in time period. So anything longer than 10 years, we don't really know what the interest rates will be in 10 years. This is kind of like our best estimates, is my understanding. Ms.
Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. Yes, they're generally locked in for 10 years, but they can be locked in for 5 years. So the Municipal Finance Authority will let us know. It all depends on what the market is doing, but they might, so it might reset in 5 years, but generally it's 10 years.
Okay. And my understanding from this report is that a 10-year borrowing term will have the least amount of overall impact on the taxpayers, in the sense that it'll only be $2.8 million that we'll need to provide over the 10-year period, as opposed to, on the other end of the spectrum, over $4 million on a 25-year term. So if we want to spend the least amount of money from our taxpayers, it's the 10-year term, but it just means we got to pay more per year for those 10 years. That's the correct understanding?
Ms. Greenan?
Through the chair, thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, wonderful. In that case, I think I know which one I prefer. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question, and I'll express my opinion too. So the question, and really, I mean, I know the answer, but I think it's more to ask Ms. Greenan to explain it, because I'm a numbers person, as you know, so I tried to plunk these in to, calculate some stuff. And then I realized, and I went to the MFA site to kind of confirm, but the interest rates aren't the kind of interest rates that you have on your mortgage, for example. They're not really annual interest rates. They do not, the interest rate is, so when you look on the table on page 4, those are the interest rates on the initial principal that stay flat over time. So when you have a 4% interest, 4.02 on a 10-year term, the interest is 89,000. That interest does not go down over time. That stays at 89 for the 10 years. Which is different than how it would be in a mortgage. Like the ratio between interest and principal changes, and you get less interest, higher principal for the same interest rate. Whereas this is, in MFA terms, the interest rate is expressed as kind of the initial principles, based on the initial principal. And they actually, yeah, they had a term for that, but I'll let Ms. Greenan maybe clarify that that's how that is.
Yes, thank you, Chair, through the chair. Yes, it's very unusual because with the MFA borrowing amortization schedules, the principal and the interest, as Director or Chair Fall said, the interest is calculated based on the original principal, and it stays calculated on that throughout the term of the loan. And so over time, as long as the interest rate stays the same, like if they don't change it in the 10 years, the principal payment and the interest payment stay the same. Whereas like with a traditional mortgage, your interest payment and principal payment vary over time, and they, it'll get lower and lower as the term goes on. But the other thing that the Municipal Finance Authority does is it invests some of the funds, like we pay a 1% fee to do the borrowing, and they invest those funds and then they give those back as actuarial earnings. So those actually reduce the amount of principal. So you'll notice the principal that we pay back is less than the original borrowing.
Thank you for that. And that was also, I mean, I learned by going to look at what they have a nice little tool on their site, and they explain, you know, you plunk in some numbers and really this actuarial earnings means that, you know, unlike a borrowing from a bank, we actually as members get something a bit back over the term, and that changes things. So I'll just add my comment. I'm not averse to a 10-year, but I kind of like 15 years, and I'll just explain briefly. If you look at the table on page 4 which is on page 188 of our 505, it shows the interests and the payments, and really from what do you get? You know, what do you get and lose when you go from a 10-year to 15-year to 20? Well, you get less. You know, when you go from 10 to 20, let's say you get your total payment drops by nearly 100,000. So instead of a payment of 281,000. You pay 184,000 per year, but over 20 years. So that means your total interest over that time frame goes up from 896,000 to 2.1 million. So you're paying an extra $1 million of tax, $1.1 million of taxpayers' money gets spent just on interest. When you go to 15 years, it's actually in a way the most efficient in the sense that you increase your payment by 60,000. But your interest payments or costs go up by 600,000. When you go from 15 to 20, your interest costs also go up by 600,000, but at only an annual saving of 30,000. So it's only half as efficient in a sense of mitigating between short term and long term. So I'm definitely in favor of 15 years over 20, but you know, I could be convinced of 10 years if that's what the board wants. It's just that's you know, an extra 60,000. The cost is extra $60,000 per year that the taxpayers have to come up with right now. So I think that's, I'll leave it there and maybe see if there's any other discussion around the table and what the committee would like to put forward. Director Gisborne.
Oh, sorry, Director Elliott, I think got her hand up. Ryan.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. I missed that. Director Elliott, go ahead.
I don't like interest. I'm sure everybody else feels the same way. And the interest rate at the 10 years is lower for such a large amount of money than any of the other options. If you're gonna not go with the lowest interest rate, then you're probably better off going with the longer term because of those differences you're talking about. The difference in interest between 15 and 20 is negligible compared to between 10 and 15. So if you're gonna go long term, go long term. If you're gonna minimize interest, then go short term. So there's other things that make me think that paying it off earlier is better, and that is because we're in an aging infrastructure and we're probably going to need more money down the road. So if we pay it off faster, we'll have that ability. So I'm kind of leaning toward 10-year.
Yeah, I see Director Lennox, so I'll let him go first, Director Gisborne, since he hasn't spoken. Go ahead, Director Lennox.
Thanks. I appreciate what everybody said. I agree with this line of reasoning. Quite simply, I'm going to move option 2 unless I hear anybody else.
Okay, it's been moved and second. I expect that's what Director Gisborne was going to do, so he beat you to it. Director Lennox, go ahead.
Yeah, I suspect as well. Thanks. Let's cut to the chase. Like, I do not want to burden future folks any more than we have to. There's an obvious major savings here. It's our responsibility to do that, I think. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was leaning to a 10-year term. I asked a few folks. I even asked my own financial advisor. I said, hey, if I was going to take out a loan for 10 years, 15 years, 20 or 25, and without skipping a heartbeat, she went 10 years because exactly the interest rates. Taking a look at our financial plan, the draft one that's included as an FYI, by increasing the tipping fees in order to actually get full cost recovery from our waste management service, we're looking at roughly an 18% decrease in the annual requisition from solid waste management from 2025 to 2026. So going with option two, which is the 10-year period, yes, is going to be a higher annual requisition to try and pay down that debt. But because we've done this cost recovery for solid waste, I don't think we're going to see like a huge increase when this gets plugged into our draft 2 of the financial plan. And just, you know, thinking about it long term, and I was sitting at home last night cuddling my 2 boys, and I just looked at little Stan and I was like, you know, he's 2 years old, and if we do a 20-year loan, then he'll be 22 by the time we finish paying this off. And I'm like, that just doesn't seem fair. So 10 years, I'm very comfortable with. The savings are tangible. As has been explained, after a 10-year period, we don't actually know what those interest rates are going to be. So anything after 10 years, it's like, yeah, it could be that, but it could be higher. So happy with 10-year term. If people are asking, hey, why is there this increase? It's not as much as the savings, you know, with the cost recovery for the tipping fees. I'll be happy to show them these figures and say, hey, like, how much do you want your kids and grandkids to be paying for this? Or are you willing to step up to the plate and we can get this paid off? And yeah, so I'm very pleased to hear that members of the assembly are also in support of the 10 years, because that's kind of, I was really feeling that in my heart this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And maybe I'll just add, maybe I'll ask Ms. Greenan just to, so we know. So, I mean, the staff report on page 188 at the bottom for option 2, which is what we have on the table, it says that you know, explains the total cost, which is nice and clear. Choosing this option would require an increase in draft 2. So that's not talking about last year's comparison. That's talking about what's in the current draft. And maybe Ms. Green, and if I could ask you, do you know about how much that is? I mean, without, you know, putting you on the spot too much, but how much of an increase compared to what we've already seen in the draft of the financial plan are we talking about here? I mean, because option 1 or the 20-year term said it would be a bit of a downward. So I presume it's less than $100,000, but it's somewhere in between. Ms. Greenan?
Well, thank you, Chair. Yes, so that would mean an additional $90,000 over what's in the budget. So in the draft 1 of the budget, we have it budgeted at a 20-year term. So this would be about 90,000 more than that. And in terms of a rate per $100,000 on page 5, it shows the tax rate per $100,000. So that means about $1.05 per $100,000 difference between draft 1 and draft 2. So the budget will go up by $1.05 per $100,000.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just scrolled down our FYI of the waste management service at the bottom, page 108 has that. And last year the requisition was 2.7 million, and sorry, that 3.3 million, and this year the draft 1's had 2.7 million. So that would presumably any increase has to come entirely out of taxes, because we've tapped out the other. So that would increase that by that 90,000. So it would still be significantly less than last year, but it would be, you know, not quite as much less. Thank
Yes,
you,
it
Ms.
would bring it
Green.
up. Yes, it would bring it up to about 2.7 million.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see the details when we get our next draft. But that's great. So we know what we're dealing with. Do we have any other discussion? Seeing none, then I will call the question on this. All those in favor? None opposed. That carries unanimously. Thank you. We have no new business, and we're on to question period. Is Mr. Galinsky there, or anyone else?
I'm here, Chair. First of all, congratulations on your acclamation to the chair of the committee. You're pleased to carry on with your work there. With regard to item 9.1, the corporate officer mentioned that there had been substantial expenditures around freedom of information, and I'm wondering if there are any figures for 2025 in terms of staff allocations and monetary allocations to this particular function.
Corporate officer, or is that for Ms. Greenan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I would have to do a little bit of research on that to provide the overall number. So if Mr. Galinsky can touch base outside of the meeting, I could help him get that information.
I think the corporate officer, that would be more than acceptable. And on that item too, I was wondering what a comfort letter is, so I thank Ms. Rodden for that. On item 9.6, I presume that the function is conversion of short-term debt to long-term debt. Is that correct?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that is correct.
I thank the manager. I was wondering what the interest rate was on that short-term debt. Are you getting any advantage whatsoever in your conversion to the long-term debt? To the chair?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just be 2 seconds and I can look that up. So the short-term debt is always a floating rate. And so the floating rate was at 3.07 on average last year, but as I say, that can change. It changes as the interest rates change.
Right. I thank the manager for that. Those were my questions, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to pose them.
You're welcome. Okay, we have I don't think there's any other questions in the audience, so there's no in-camera session. We are adjourned.
Recording stopped.
I think we can just sing almost the requisite, but have it paid for next year.
Yeah,